of Orcs and Men is a role-playing adventure game provided by Cyanide Studios and Spiders Studios. It's on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and PC. Now, the game itself is... it's unlike a lot of games. You find yourself in a world of Orcs and Men, funnily enough, with the odd twist that you are playing the Orcs and Goblins. In this world, the humans are the oppressive, basically bad guy race, and the Orcs and Goblins are the oppressed races. Think of it a bit like the elves in Dragon Age Origins, and you've kind of got yourself there, except the Orcs are huge and pretty capable of looking after themselves. It's not going to be the first reference to Dragon Age Origins you're going to find in this review. So yeah, the setup is that the King Damocles, fantastic name, of the human realms has decided to start invading the southern worlds, the realms of the Orcs and the Goblins, the Greenskins, and has met a lot of resistance, so he's built up a big wall around his lands. And there's basically a bit of a standoff, and the humans are trying to recruit the dwarves and elves to support them to conquer the Orcs, who will then be enslaved. So it's an interesting and slightly different take on the standard fantasy genre, which is always nice to see. It's kind of odd seeing the Orcs particularly depicted as the good guys, but there you go. The setup is that you take control of a single orc who is a member of a group of orcs fighting against the human oppressors. You're part of an elite combat group, and you're basically sent to assassinate the emperor of the humans on your own, as you do, one man killing spree, or one orc killing spree, as the case may be. So yeah, it's fairly standard. You are sent to meet up with a very old, very clever goblin by the name of Styx, and Butcher, who is the name of your character, and Styx are the two protagonists in this game. They're the two characters that you'll be playing as throughout the encounter. They're two very separate types of character. As you might have imagined, the Orc Butcher is basically your heavy melee combat character. He's your tank. He wades in, beats people with a very big stick until they stop moving. And Styx is more your rogue character. He can stealthily assassinate characters up ahead. He can throw knives. In fact, he has ranged attacks, whereas Butcher doesn't, and things like that. So it's your fairly standard mix of warrior, tank, and roguish thief type character. Now, the combat mechanics, so I mentioned Dragon Age Origins earlier, and that's the closest link that I can come to any game. You control either character or the other, but you can switch between the two at any time with a hitting of the Y button on Xbox, or triangle button for PlayStation 3, etc. And you have a number of skills in your repertoire, depending on what you've leveled up at the time and everything like that. And it works in a semi-real-time, semi-turn-based combat, exactly like Dragon Age Origins did, in that you can queue up actions and they are then played out in that sequence according to the speed. Actions get interrupted by enemy attacks and things like that. Each skill has a certain length of time it takes to attack, depending on whether it's a heavy attack, a slow attack, or that sort of thing. It's an odd one, because it's like the Dragon Age Origins one, but it's not quite as intuitive. The Dragon Age Origins combat system took a little bit of getting used to, as does this one, but the one in Dragon Age felt a lot more... I don't know, it just worked a little bit smoother. It just seemed to fit a little bit and flow a little bit better. This one in Orcs and Men can get a little bit frustrating, and you don't always know how it's going to pan out for you, how the interplay between characters is going to work. Character mapping and sort of collision detection and things can be a little bit odd, and you will sometimes see your character running all over the place trying to go the long way round to hit someone that's right in front of him. It's a little bit odd, but all in all, considering, it works quite well, and it's kind of like a budget version of Dragon Age Origins combat system. That's the best way for me to describe it. And while no means broken or anything like that, it's just not quite as slick as that. I mentioned the stealth. You have, like I said, you have the basic combat mechanics, but then outside of combat, while you're exploring the environment, you have Styx, who can basically tell Butcher to stay where he is, because he's an orc and he's huge. He's about the size of a house, so he's not going to be stealthing anywhere. He tells him to stay where he is, and he basically goes invisible or sneaks around. And if you can get up behind enemy characters, you can assassinate them. Again, the application is interesting. Because the world environments are basically corridors, there's not a lot of variety. We're not talking Hitman levels of stuff here, and I'm sure you weren't expecting that. We're not even really looking at Splinter Cell level type of stuff here. This is basically just an added option to sort of break up the gameplay a bit. It does mean that if you come across a large group of enemies, there's usually a few stragglers around the edges that you can sneak up and assassinate to sort of thin out the numbers before you charge on in with Butcher, but there's not a huge amount to it. It's a nice little addition, I guess, but it's not anything groundbreaking, it's not anything too exciting, it's not going to revolutionise the game, but again, it adds a bit of variety and adds another string to this game's bow, so there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the way leveling works in the game is, as you can imagine with any RPG, as you kill things and progress through the game, you get experience, and as you get experience, you go up levels. Now, it doesn't have a traditional combat tree, I suppose. What you have is you have 3 wheels of skills. You have your attacking stance wheel, you have your special abilities wheel, and then you have your defensive stance wheel. For Butcher. For Styx, you have melee, attack, special wheel, and ranged attacks. Now, the way leveling up works is that you can either, depending on your level and what's available, either select a new skill to unlock, or you can upgrade an existing skill. It's about what you'd expect. Unlocking a new skill means you can then use that skill. Upgrading the new skill will generally add some sort of stat to it, like it might mean that it does more damage or it's less likely to be blocked, things like that. All very standard. Your special wheel basically consists of anything that doesn't fit in the other two, so you've got both characters have the option to revive the other. There's an option for Butcher to throw sticks at people, which is quite possibly the most awesome thing in the game. It's quite funny to see him just be thrown. You can level that up if that's what you choose to do. And then there's also one where Styx can sort of increase Butcher's healing rate. Again, pretty much what you'd expect. There's not really any magic in the game as such apart from that. You can also choose to level up your attacking stance or your defensive stance as a whole, which means any attacks done in that stance will have certain effects put on them, like they'll be 25% less likely to be blocked, or they're more likely to inflict wounds, bleeding, which is essentially just sustained damage over time. It's fairly standard. It's a lot like the original Dragon Age game in that respect, and it works just the same. My one annoyance with it is in combat, you have to go into basically a very slowed down, into slow-mo mode to then queue up your attacks. You can shortcut and hotkey 2 attacks onto right trigger and left trigger, but you'll find that 2 attacks really isn't enough. So, because of the nature of the combat, you're needing to use several different attacks queued up at any one time, so you will have to jump in and out of the skill trees, which really breaks up the flow and kind of ruins that suspension of disbelief a little bit. I know you had to do that in other games, again, like Dragon Age Origins, but it didn't seem quite as much busy, where you had 6 hotkeys and shortcuts rather than just the 2, and that does affect it, because it does affect the immersion of the game, and especially in an RPG, immersion and the ability to suspend your disbelief is absolutely key, because you've got to be invested in the game and what's going on. If you're constantly being brought out of that by having to bring up menus and select and queue up, it all feels very much like a game rather than an actual adventure, which might not sound that big, but when it comes to actually engaging in the story and what's going on, it makes a big difference, and that's a bit of a shame. But all in all, the combat itself, nothing to get overly excited about, but it's capable, it's competent, it's fairly solid. Now, we move on to some of the stuff that might not be quite so good about the game, if we're honest. Now, the story itself, it's different. playing as the orcs who are the good guys and everything like that, it makes a welcome change. It's something a little bit different, but the actual story itself is fairly standard. You're trying to get through a city and out the other side, and on the way you have to do everybody's jobs for them to make sure that they do what you want to do. So you're constantly doing everyone's busy work for them. You're sneaking through town, and you're murdering gang members, and you're clearing out the Inquisition and stuff like that.
Let me guess. Jared's become inconvenient? You might say that, but I can't attack him directly.
It works as an excuse to do the story and a story hook and everything like that, but it's not anything groundbreaking. It's not anything you've not seen before. Unfortunately, the game is somewhat let down by its voice acting and its writing. The voice acting is, while nothing terrible, we're not talking like Last Remnant type of thing here, but it's just not very convincing. Especially, you can see from early on in the game, particularly when the orcs are talking to each other, it's obvious that these lines are said out of context. What I mean by that is that when the voice actors are in the sound booth recording these, it's obviously they don't really have that much of a context for what they're saying. So, as a result, a lot of the inflection and a lot of the emphasis it just seems a bit off.
I climbed to the top of a hill to the northwest and saw the heath and their fucking wall to the north.
They've obviously inserted quite a lot of swearing in to try and give it that gritty, grown-up edge, and it just kind of makes it feel a bit juvenile at times, if I'm honest. In the same way that they did it a lot in The Witcher, and it just didn't really feel all that convincing. It just kind of felt like they were doing it to go, look, hey, we're really grown up and shit. Just the overall quality of the voice acting, while nothing particularly offensive, is just a bit meh. So that's a shame. Also, it's not helped at all by the way the conversation flows. Maybe I've been spoilt by games like Mass Effect and titles like that with their really flowing and intuitive conversation systems where it feels a lot more natural. But in Orcs and Men, there are a lot of long pauses between characters saying anything, where they're just staring at each other in that uncanny valley kind of Fallouty way, which really again drags you out of the experience, and that's not ideal. That's quite frustrating. It really is, and it really rams home in big neon letters that you are playing a game.
You need me?
Again, if you can look over that, then that's fine. It bugs me a lot, and it just constantly reminds me that I'm in a game. It isn't really what you want. Also in this game, the camera, not so great. Generally, just in general moving around, not a problem. Works fairly well. It's kind of odd. It feels a little bit too close to the characters, while at the same time feeling too close into the environment at the same time. It's odd. It just everywhere feels very congested. I never had a problem in combat seeing who I was fighting, oddly enough, but just moving around the environment, it just felt a bit awkward. There's also a really annoying thing where if you go onto the pause menu or the inventory menu and come back out, you have to wait for the save menu to close before you can then tell the camera to move. So what I mean is normally on any game you would be exiting a menu, and if you hold left or right with the right stick, the camera will start to rotate as soon as the menu closes. If you do that in your Orcs and Men, the camera won't recognise that you're inputting anything until you bring the joypad back to the centre and then reapply the direction. So you'll see on some of the clips that I'm doing that are on the background here that after I've exited a menu, I'll start running and I'll run into things because the camera won't move, and I'll have to remember to sort of ungesture that way and then gesture back that way. It's a little thing, but it's really quite annoying, and it really ruins that suspension of disbelief because you have to remember to go, oh yeah, I can't use that stick. And if you're remembering that you're using a joystick and that it's highlighting the fact that you are holding a controller playing the game rather than actually being the character, for a game like an RPG, that's an absolute killer. Now, the game itself is good. I like it. I was surprised. I didn't expect much from the title, I'll be honest with you, going into it. What I got was quite an interesting title. If you can see past some of its niggles and flaws, which are by no means major, they're just little annoyances, there's actually quite a good game in here. I don't like to resort to the if you like this, then you'll like this sort of trope. But in all honesty, if you like Dragon Age Origins, if that quite hardcore turn-based combat system worked for you, it's pretty much the same here. They've tried to replicate that fairly well, and they have. It's a little bit annoying. It's not quite as good as the Dragon Age Origins one, but it works. The story, while not good, it's not going to revolutionise storytelling in any way. It's adequate. It's interesting. The main character is interesting, if a bit of a meathead, and Styx seems like an interesting character, the goblin that's the second protagonist of the game. I would recommend giving it a go. If you like RPGs, and particularly if you like the more, for want of a phrase, hardcore turn-based action RPGs like that, then it's definitely worth giving it a go. It's got a distinctly Western feel to it, which is unusual for a game of that style. And in all honesty, I dare say you'd be able to pick this up at a pretty reasonable price, because it doesn't seem like it's that well-known or popular a game. So if you get a chance to pick this up for anything less than 20 quid, or $30, say, if you're listening from America, I would definitely give it a go, because you might just be surprised with it. It's not going to be a game that you'll remember for years and years and years. It's not going to be a game that you'll fall in love with, especially. But it is a game that you'll enjoy playing, and it's better than a lot of titles out there. It's definitely worth giving it a go, and while I can't give it my sort of really massive go out and buy this now or you have to buy it seal, I definitely recommend it if you can get it at a reasonable price, because it is a decent title, especially to tide you over during the sort of slightly slower summer months until you get some of the big AAA titles. So, all in all, I'm giving it a good review. There are some people that won't be able to put up with the little niggles, but if you can see past those, definitely give it a go. Yeah.